Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with the Mid-South Wrestling Review Series for the 31st of July, 1982. I keep wanting to say 2000 because, well, to think that it's almost 40 years ago. Moving up on this stuff is just amazing to me. A couple of years we'll be there, but that's just really sad because that tells me that wrestling's been pretty well dead for 20 years. Anyhow, at least the way it used to, at least the way it was when they still drew money. Mr. Olympia and Billy Starr is here. Olympia starts with a hip toss takeover, and he is pretty aggressive. Starr, though, as mentioned in previous audios, has a good offense, uses some cheating, runs into the buckle, and gets chased around by Olympia. Olympia not willing to back down. However, Starr willing to do just about anything to get him to back off. Takes a few cheap shots at him and snaps him over with a snapmare, among other things. Gets some near falls after a lot of stuff. One thing I like about Billy Starr and a lot of enhancement talent, if you're out there, male or female, and you are enhancement talent for an independent company when we're post COVID, is that you can, in fact, use near falls as a way to show yourself credible as an enhancement talent, even if you're not doing a heck of a lot. Hitting an offensive maneuver and trying to get a win shows you it's a big deal. Missing diving headbutt from the second rope, and Olympia manages to hit a I guess you'd say a hip toss, and misses the diving fist drop, and eventually a sleeper from Olympia gets him a victory here. As we move into the next in the contest, Mike Bond versus Dr. Death Steve Williams. We have seen Williams before, although we haven't seen him in a few weeks. Dr. Death, of course, is a major force in wrestling over the next 15 or so years, give or take, here from 82. Actually, a little longer than that, probably 20 years. But anyway, Williams, with the traditional singlet on, tosses his opponent across the ring like he's a sack of nothing, and then manages to work his way out of being wrestled. And then we see the go behind. Bond tries to get a few roll ups on Williams, and does, but Williams always comes out and uses his ride time mentality to his advantage. The announcer's doing a phenomenal job of putting him over as a collegiate star, and I think that's another thing announcers need to do more of. I can't even there is not an announcer in WWE that I can listen to a whole broadcast of anymore. I was working tonight during the NXT takeover, and for the most part had the announcers off. When I turned them on, because I was answering a couple of emails and couldn't be looking at the screen, they literally were just 10 minutes and I was done. Bear hug by Williams and hard shots by Bond. Bond tries to come out and tries to take Williams out of the corner. Backdrop by Williams, and hits the chop block and the clip. And then we see kind of the running power slam from Williams that he becomes known for, kind of that Oklahoma Stampede type maneuver, and he gets a victory there. We move on to one-man gang in a handicap match, and this is against Stark and Price. Why he's in two back-to-back matches, I don't quite understand, but he is. He is the charge of one Skandar Akbar, and a rather scary charge at that. Again, One Man Gang has been pretty well protected up to this point in his Mid-South run, and that doesn't change here. Shoulder tackles and a couple of drop kicks by the enhancement talent. The enhancement talent not made to look so weak that the gang looks insurmountable for anyone, but they're made to look weak enough to where, yeah, you've been in there with somebody, and that's the way it should be if you're going to put a guy over as a major enhancement guy. They could do this with Braun Strowman, they could do this with Keith Lee in modern day, but they choose not to because they're just goofy. Anyway, hard shots by the gang, and he hits forearms. Doesn't have to do a lot, just has to make his offense matter and look good. And then we see him hit the double fisted or double hand choke. Akbar looks satisfied on the outside of the ring, and we see, oddly enough, talk about devastating, a pile driver from the one man gang. 1, 2, 3, and of course he's going to get a victory because he's A, that big, and B, a pile driver gets a victory almost anywhere. Then we move on to a second one-man gang match, which is what confused me because they're back-to-back. Maybe it's clipped from another program, but Iron Mike Sharp and the one-man gang, which is where I imagine they would go. Bit of a clipped match as Sharp has gang in the bear hug pretty quickly. Gang actually gets slammed by Sharp in the middle of this one too, which is just really intense and bizarre. Akbar interferes and gets Sharp to chase him around. Gang manages to drop a couple of elbows on Sharp, and meanwhile, Gang stays on Sharp and tries to hit a pile driver, but a backdrop from Sharp is the way things go. Fans solidly behind Mike Sharp. I know that's a weird concept for most people, but it is there. Sharp brings Akbar into the ring after sending Gang to the outside of the ring, hits a pile driver on Akbar, much to the delight of just about anybody, and the referee will not count a pin on Akbar because he's not the legal combatant. Sharp feigns being surprised by this and goes out to the floor unfinished. Event, or actually disqualification, win for Sharp in that match. We go into Killer Khan against Iron Mike Sharp here, and obviously Sharp seems to be the main target of just about everybody here. And we see Sharp and Khan. Akbar, of course, again, the main catalyst in that. Obviously, Killer Khan, much more of a power-based, well, not more than Gang, but more strike-based than Gang. Gang doesn't have the arsenal of a Killer Khan. Khan, of course, also having more experience. Cranks down on Sharp pretty consistently. Sharp tries to power out with a top wrist lock, and they fight over the top wrist lock for a couple of minutes. Sharp gaining an advantage eventually, although not very quickly. Chokes and punches and thrusts by Killer Khan. Khan gets advantages wherever he can, and we quickly see this match break down into a bit more of a brawl than the previous contest for Sharp. Sharp dominating most of the match, cut off by Killer Khan. Khan with a body slam and goes to the top rope, and second rope rather, on the inside, misses the knee drop, which I think is the first time in Mid-South that he has missed that second rope knee drop on the inside. So Sharp maybe has a little more credibility than his adversary. Once again, Akbar manages to interfere, this time actually smacking the referee. Sharp manages to take Akbar down and kick and punch at him. Eventually, I believe this leads to a match between the two. The referee will not count. But again, Sharp wins by disqualification. So, obviously a lot going on between Akbar and Mike Sharp, and Akbar's men and Mike Sharp. And eventually, obviously, you could go around the horn, the house shows and the like, and do manager versus wrestler, and get a bump in attendance off of that. Then we go to Rick Harris against Rick McCord. McCord eventually becomes Austin Idol, I'm pretty sure. Rick Harris, of course, later becomes Black Bart, and a happy little pear tree has us all. Anyway, Bart, who still is involved with Akbar, although not as seriously as once before, is, having a little bit of challenge finding himself, although McCord does present a nice guy for him to beat up on, body slams, forearms, and the like. Um, and for the most part, he hits a neck breaker and is pretty aggressive. Again, to think that Bart is about 5 years away here from being world class heavyweight champion, pretty big deal. When you look at, going from territory to territory and how there used to be plenty of jobs for lots of folks. Anyway, takeover by Harrison again, a crossbody by McCord. McCord with a drop kick under the chin. Doesn't, excuse me, doesn't have a lot of weight on him. But he really doesn't need it, as we see an Irish whip and a clothesline by Harris, and eventually that hangman's neckbreaker type maneuver, which leads to victory for Harris. DiBiase and Duggan versus Bart and Romo is up next. DiBiase and Duggan aligning officially on television, I believe for the first time. Certainly the first time here in Mid-South. And, of course, DiBiase, still your North American champion. Him having the tag team eventually is I guess you'd say, the foundation for what would later become the Rat Pack. DiBiase managing to get, surprisingly, watch his opponent not do so well with Jesse Barr. Barr manages to hit some arm drags and a suplex on Duggan. Barr, who has managed to look pretty aggressive, assertive, and does pretty okay for the first few minutes of his time in there with DiBiase. DiBiase hits a knee to the side of the head, among other things, tags off to Duggan. Duggan and DiBiase become a regular tag team, tag off to Romo, and Duggan manages to hit a big slam on him, release slam, spinning that Duggan becomes famous for later, and a huge knee drop, nice elevation by Duggan on the knee drop. Duggan at a time, for a guy his size, was super athletic, and I think a lot of people forget that because he wasn't allowed to show that as much once getting to the World Wrestling Federation. Duggan's head used as a weapon, and then we see a figure four by DiBiase and a win for him. The Assassin versus Colonel Buck Robley is up next, and they only have about 7 minutes and some change left in the program. So, but before we get there, DiBiase and his involvement with Buck Robley is highlighted. And, that's kind of there, which, DiBiase and Robley, which is a match that in a million years I wouldn't book because I think it's an insult to DiBiase, is there. DiBiase, that match is clipped, though, and we see DiBiase hit a second rope elbow. Robley hits a couple of shots, a couple of punches before DiBiase tries to get a body slam. I think that Mike Sharp and others are outside the ring. Robley managing to attempt a sleeper holds on for a little bit. DiBiase gets a shot up and loads the glove and has to use the glove temporarily. Atomic drop by Robley. Robley does not get a victory. They cut the match off before showing a finish there. Again, Robley and the Assassin are given the final, 5 minutes of the program, something like that. And obviously, they are trying to get Robley over as a challenger, which I don't understand the logic of when you have other more talented individuals in the area. Snapmare takeover, but then again, in a territory you were trying to use, 14, 16 people at once and running a full territory with them, so it was a different mentality at the time. Actually, I would say a better mentality because the people you had under contract had to know, or under agreement, had to know how to actually work, as opposed to having 100 people that you can choose from at any given moment. Leaping back elbow by the Assassin, and the Assassin then manages to hit Robley under the chin. Couple of kicks, couple of punches, and things go relatively in the right direction for the assassin. Meanwhile, Robley gets pinned, or nearly pinned, by the assassin, and a big backbreaker for the assassin gets him a near fall again. Assassin really doesn't have a main event program at the time, which he doesn't necessarily need. Robley does manage to get a sleeper on. DiBiase runs in and eventually tries to help up the assassin before squaring off with Robley for a couple of seconds as the program draws to a close. We will enter the month of August here in Mid-South in 1982 upon our return. Keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment. Until next time, everybody.